What if I told you that you could increase your rental income without needing to actually purchase more properties? Welcome back. My name is Cody. I'm an investor-friendly realtor here in Winnipeg, and today we're talking about creative ways to improve your current portfolio, because we all know that buying right now is tough. And so it's tough to find deals, it's tough to find cash flowing properties. Why don't we instead look at your current property and see how it's performing and see if we can increase that so that you can make more income, potentially allowing for more purchases down the road. So one of the best ways to increase your rent for your property is actually to switch from a long-term rental to something that's more similar to a pad split or co-living. This works especially well if you are living in the property yourself. But the way you do this is when you have spare rooms, you rent them out. And so if you aren't using the space, or maybe you bought a house anticipating needing to use the space down the road, you can use these spare rooms in the meantime to rent to family, coworkers, other people like that. That way you can increase your monthly income by renting out the room while also subsidizing your living costs by lowering them. And I know what you're thinking. You're already saying, man, I don't want to rent out my room to a stranger. And that's why I recommend if you have maybe a sibling, a cousin, a coworker, somebody you could actually rent out to, then you aren't renting to a stranger. But also, if you want to make money, sometimes you got to be a little uncomfortable. So this strategy actually does still work even if you aren't living in the property, because you can leverage your asset into more rental units. So if you take a 3-bedroom house, for example, that might rent you anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500 in the city. But if you charge $750 a room, now all of a sudden your gross rent for the property has gone up. Now, there is a lot more expenses associated with a pad split. And so I wouldn't just jump into it assuming it's going to be the same. So another great way to increase your income is that you actually take the rent by the room a little bit further and you actually add a full secondary suite. So the biggest benefit of this is that it's actually separate living spaces now. So before, when you were talking about, well, it was really me, but it was me, you through me saying, I don't want to rent out to strangers, share a space, that's weird. Now you can build a fully separate suite with their own kitchen, their own bathroom, do it above board, make it legal, get permits for it. And then you have this additional secondary suite that not only provides extra income, but when you go to sell the property, it's worth more because you've changed its use. Okay, this doesn't work for every property, but depending on where you are, if you're in a high rent demand area, it's definitely worth considering. Okay, so now you've actually gone ahead and made the secondary suite. Now what? I mean, you can rent it out to long-term tenants and that's great, but you can also put it on Airbnb. See, that's the one loophole, but it's not really a loophole. That's the one use case for Airbnb that the city hasn't closed. And this is across almost every city because they want you, if you are owner occupied, to be able to rent out these secondary suites on Airbnb and still be make money and really subsidize your mortgage. Now, as you could tell with each of these methods, it's more and more work for each one of them. But as you increase the amount of effort you put in, so does the income also go up, right? So Airbnb, you can make a lot more money than a long-term rental, but it's a lot more work. You're essentially running a small business. So if you don't want to get into the hospitality industry, there is a couple other steps that we can take to slash our expenses and to reduce our expenses rather than just increasing our income on the property. So another big thing is that we can't really reduce some expenses. We can't change how much our tax is on the property taxes. We can maybe negotiate a bit on the insurance, but one of the best ways is with utilities. And so right here, you'll see that if you have a property where you have 2 tenants living in there in different spaces, you can separate utilities and then push that expense off onto the tenants. If you're currently not having your tenants pay utilities, find a way so you can include them in paying the utilities so you're not on the hook for that extra expense. A lot of times tenants will overvalue how much utilities, when they're included in the price, how much they actually cost, right? So if a property is renting for $1,500 plus utilities or $1,600 utilities included, most tenants don't understand that utilities are going to be more than $100. Okay, a couple other things you could do as well is if you own a larger property, you can maybe put in some low flow toilets to save on water, other things like that. At the end of the day, these are a couple of smaller expenses. The more units you have, the more these small expenses compound and grow into a much larger effect that can actually save you a lot of money. One of the biggest ways that you can cut your expenses while actually also increasing your income is to find better tenants. See, what a lot of people fail to understand is that when you own a rental property, a lot of your expenses will actually depend on the quality of the tenants. Worse tenants cause more maintenance, they have more vacancy because they move out more. And on top of that, they're not going to maintain the property as well, increasing your capital expenses or making those capital expenses come due earlier than they normally would be. So how do you find better tenants? Well, we've covered a decent number of videos on how to properly screen for good tenants. But the biggest thing is just actually going through the steps, literally screening them. If you are not taking the proper action to do background checks, credit verification, or income verification, you are already setting yourself up for failure. And so if you have bad tenants in place right now, I would go over the steps on how to maybe not renew their lease and then get better tenants in the future. Sometimes that means you actually have to upgrade the property so that it attracts better tenants. But again, if you're upgrading the property, it's going to increase your property value, but also increase your income. And the side benefit is that it lowers your expenses. So all three of those are good. So to me, it's really a no-brainer. And at the end of the day, if you're still bleeding cash, there is a time when it makes sense to get rid of that property and sell it. Maybe you're not going to take as high as a profit on it. Maybe you're even breaking even when you sell it. But there comes a time when an investment has gone through its lifespan and it's actually better to sell it. If you still want to keep it and you have a lot of equity built up in it, but it's not cash flowing, sometimes you can refinance it, use that money to buy something else that's going to subsidize the bad cash flow. And that is only assuming you own a really high appreciating asset. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend taking more debt on something that's currently losing you money. So at the end of the day, a lot of people I think are going to start doing this a lot more with real estate becoming a lot harder to acquire. They're going to start looking at their portfolio, increase the way that they act as a landlord so they can make more money, provide tenants with better products, which is better properties that perform better, and increase your net operating income.